I grew up in Sacramento, California. I think I had a very typical childhood. You know, sports, summers spent in the swimming pool, running around the neighborhood, riding your bicycles everywhere. Well, my aunt, Lisa, had passed away, and my dad immediately flew to Texas to check on her affairs. He came back with 3 more kids for our house, and I became kind of lost in the mix. In order to get attention and to cope with it, I was saying inappropriate things at all times. My mom, she would even warn my teachers. I may just apologize right now for what Todd might say. My 3rd grade teacher called her, "Lois, I am so mad at you. I've had to bite my cheek so many times when Todd opens his mouth. I want to laugh, but I have to, you know, scold him." My older brother, Mark, was 4 years older than me, and he was my hero. I idolized him. I went everywhere he went. He wanted to be a soccer player, so I wanted to be a soccer player. As I got into high school, I quickly excelled and got national notoriety and had several colleges offering me scholarships. I selected one and went there for 1 year, and it just wasn't the right fit, so I quickly left, signed my first professional contract at age 20 in Las Vegas, played in San Francisco, Sacramento, and Phoenix, Arizona, until one day I received a phone call from my dad in Savannah, Georgia, telling me he was having a quadruple bypass and he needed my assistance. So I hopped on the next plane. So my father had a surgery, and it went very well and very fast. Within 6 weeks, he was recovered and back on his feet, and he returned to his job. So I went and got a job around the corner just so I could finance my trip home to California. I met a lady, and we did a lot of partying together. We began using a lot of cocaine and alcohol and smoking a lot of marijuana. And I was introduced to a needle for the first time and started shooting up cocaine. The needle took it to the next level. It was an escape mechanism. It got me out of my head. It helped me to deal with feelings of inadequacy from not being on a soccer field. It helped to, you know, just, you know, partying doesn't start off as, you know, all just covering stuff up. You do it because it feels good. You know, if it didn't feel good, you wouldn't have millions of people addicted. One day she came to me, "Todd, I'm pregnant." You know, my initial response was to get in my truck and drive to California. Something came over me, and I started thinking about being a father for the first time and how I could impact someone's life in a positive way. Shortly after my first child came into this world, I was introduced to opiates. I was on prescription painkillers for some old soccer injuries, and, you know, I was milking it. But with opiates, 1 gets you high and 2 gets you messed up. So you take 3, pretty soon you're taking a handful at a time. One day I had ran out and I was on full-blown withdrawals while I was trying to work. I confided in a friend that I worked with. He handed me a bag of heroin, and I proceeded to go into the bathroom and smoke it. So the next day I wanted more. I wanted to do some more. And it was at that point that I started shooting up heroin. The first time I ever tried heroin, I was fearful because I had gone up to the highest level, but I was excited because just the way it made me feel, it was a warmth that spread up through your whole body. I was content to be numb. I felt like I could use and no one knew. So my second child was born about 4 years into my addiction, and I was working full-time to support my family, but the majority of that money was going to feed my addiction. I accepted a job offer to coach that included 2 other jobs and was able to move my family back in under one roof where everything was going great. I'm coaching these college student athletes, telling them of the perils of alcohol and drugs into their system. But as soon as practice lets out, I'm rushing home to get high. On one road trip, after consuming a large quantity of marijuana cookies, I nearly crashed my vehicle, injuring myself and my players. The hypocrisy of what I was doing at this point wasn't lost on me, and I even started to second guess whether or not I could hide this habit any longer. One morning, a knock on the door revealed that I had existing warrants for my arrest. They immediately arrested me. I lost all 3 jobs, and that ended the relationship between my kid's mother and myself. I started using again. I began going in and out of detox centers, and every time that I would come out, my brother would be in my room with a Dilaudid in one hand and a cracked stem in the other. So my recovery never had a chance.
And so now you're in Sacramento and you started working on a farm, correct?
It wasn't really a farm, it was just medical marijuana grow houses. Had large quantities of weed at my disposal. In my downtime, I would jump onto my mountain bike and ride down into the hood. That's when I got the moniker Weed Man. People would see me riding and they'd be, "Hey, Weed Man, come here." And I started trading the weed for heroin and methamphetamines. One day when I was hanging out with my neighbor, I met Jessica. She walked up onto my porch, and it was literally like there was a rope tied between us, because the moment our eyes met, I was drawn to her, and from that moment we were inseparable.
Let's go ahead and tell the whole story.
I'm trying to think where to begin. Well, for a while I had hid my heroin addiction. As it progressed, she became aware of it and confronted me with it one day. She told me that she had been down that road and she had been clean from heroin for 18 years and she wouldn't go down that road with me. She gave me a choice at that moment. Todd, it's either me or the heroin. And I had a fully loaded rig in my hand and I handed it to her. We were inseparable. I had my best friend and girlfriend all in one, and we started making plans to marry. Jessica loved the cemetery. She just loved hanging out at them. She wanted to be a plot keeper. So we went to East Lawn Mortuary in Sacramento, and we were just spending time together. I must have fallen asleep in her lap, because when I woke up, she had written me a beautiful 18-page letter. The first paragraph talked about how much she loved me and would always love me. The last paragraph said the same thing, but everything in between that was her kicking my butt up and down the page, telling me that she was ready to settle down with me, but that she had to have me at my best. It was approaching dinner time, and so I said, well, look, I'll go get us some dinner. When I returned, Jessica was crying, and I asked her what was wrong. And she said, I have a really bad headache. So I said, well, look, the hospital is just right around the corner. Let me take you there. And she said, no, I just want to rest. I was lying there holding her and just stroking her hair. And at some point, we both fell asleep. When I woke up just a short time later, I realized that there was something wrong with Jess. She was unresponsive to any attempts to wake her. Remembering that there was a fire station just a few blocks away, I immediately took off, sprinting down the road. I remember it being unusually humid for that time of year, and I could just feel the moisture just sticking to me as I was sprinting to the fire station. And when I got there, it was unusually quiet, and there was no activity inside. As I began to panic, I heard a noise behind me, and I turned and seen the fire truck returning from its previous call. And I explained the situation to them and begged them to follow me, and immediately took off sprinting down the road. When they arrived, I knew it was very serious because their demeanor immediately changed. After they had pushed the gurney into the back of the ambulance, I was frantically cleaning up my spot, trying to get all my belongings, and I told them that I would meet them at the hospital. I remember running to the hospital thinking that Jess was gone, that she was gone from me. And I remember the urgency when I walked into the emergency room and the doctor pulled me to the side and told me that it had been a massive brain hemorrhage. They told me that they were going to put her on life support. But the doctor said, I need you to know that we're putting her on life support for you. You need to come to terms with this. They allowed me to stay there with her around the clock. I played music for her, did her nails, and just tried to make her feel comfortable. And on that third day, they told me they were going to take her off of life support. They took her off of life support, and someone very quickly had put a Xanax in my mouth. As her breathing began to be labored, I lost control and I started yelling at all the nurses and the doctors, please put the tube back in. And as I found out later, I didn't have the authority to tell them to do anything. And so for 32 minutes, she fought for breath. And it was at that moment that I had to let her go. And I brushed her hair away from her face, and I told her, Jess, it's okay for you to go. I'm going to be fine. You can go be with your mom, go be with your dad. I will see you soon. And I let her go. The next lucid moment I have is I'm in a McDonald's parking lot with a needle of heroin in my hand. At this point, I had the biggest hole I had ever experienced in the middle of my chest, and thought maybe I could fill it with heroin. One morning, as I'm roaming the streets, cutting through an alleyway, and I haven't had anything to eat for several days. I come to a city park where there are 2 slices of warm pizza on a park bench. I quickly destroy one in a matter of seconds. And as I reach for that second slice, I hear, "That's not for you." I turn and look behind me, and there's no one there. It's at that moment that a fullness is in my belly. A peace settles over me, and for the first time, it becomes clear to me that God is with me and is speaking to me. I say to God, "Who is this for?" And he tells me, "You'll know who to give it to." So I wrap this slice of pizza up, and I walk up to the light rail station a few blocks away. And as I get to the end of the station, a man looks up at me, and I know this slice of pizza is for him. He became overcome with emotion at that time, and he broke down and he started crying, and I didn't know what had just happened, and I could feel my tears starting to come at this time, and without saying another word, I turned around and I walked away from this man. Every once in a while, I would call home to let my children know that I was still alive. One day I was calling back to Georgia, and my daughter answered the phone, and she says to me, "Daddy, you're my hero." And I say to her, "How can I be your hero? I'm a homeless junkie." And she said to me, she said, "Because, Daddy, you're bigger than this, and you're gonna beat this." I hung up the phone with her and cried and thought about those words that she said to me. I had resigned myself to dying on the streets. Not even a week later, as I'm nodding off, I get picked up by the police. 2 separate warrants. I'm now withdrawing from heroin in jail. We read the Daily Bread every evening after mail call. And after the Daily Bread was read, everyone would say, as the prayers go up, the blessings come down. And I remember getting really quiet on my bunk. I guess I just tuned out, these other 100 men making noise. And I said, "Jesus, please either take the taste of dope out of my mouth or bring me home, because I can't beat this by myself." An overwhelming sense of love and peace just came down upon me. I knew it was over at that moment, and that I didn't have to fight this thing anymore. The next day I called home to talk to my kids, and once again my daughter answers the phone, and I tell her I'm ready to come home. And she said, "Daddy, I've been waiting for you to say that for 5 years now." I get a reduced sentence. I probably should have gotten 6 months, and they kicked me out of it after serving 7 days. I go to my to my dope dealer's house, and I tell her, I say, look, I need a bus ticket. The next day I was on a bus to Georgia. I never looked back. From my daughter. It says, Daddy, I miss you. I hope you're doing all right. Message me when you can. I know times are hard, but they're hard here as well. Remember, God has a future for everybody, and everything happens for a reason. Even though we haven't seen each other in a long time, I still have the memories, and I love you, Dad. You'll always be my #1 hero, no matter what happens. Huh. Yeah, I remember that. I was sleeping underneath freeways, and fast forward 2 years and I'm sitting in a car with air conditioning, and I have my own house. I'm 43 years old and I bought my first bed, and the restoration of relationships has been amazing. They got restored beyond what it ever was. I got to baptize my daughter, I got to baptize my son, and that was really just the highlight of the last 2 years. I couldn't have wrote this script. I would have sold myself short. There's just God's hands all over it in so many areas that you're just like, wow, bring me an atheist so I can show him this, and like, what's your argument now?
I think it's really amazing looking back on those posts. The person that's posting, hate my effing life, wish I could die, all these things. That's not who we see sitting here at this table today.
As a child, I struggled to find my identity. Since that moment that I cried out to Jesus, He has healed that hole in my heart. I have an identity in the kingdom of God now. I've been fully restored. If Jesus Christ can take a lost child, a homeless man, a drug addict, a criminal, a man who's lost the love of his life, and fully restored him, what can't He do? 1 Peter 5:8. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. To Him be the power forever and ever. Amen.